What is going on, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Daily Energy News Beat Stand-Up here on this gorgeous Wednesday, May 24th, 2023. As always, I'm your humble correspondent, Michael Tanner, coming to you from an undisclosed location here in Dallas, Texas, joined by the executive producer of the show, the purveyor of the show, and the director and publisher of the world's greatest website, energynewsbeat.com, Stuart Turley. My man, how we doing today?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. We got us a whale of a show.
Yeah, we do have us a blue whale of a show. Nonetheless, big one, lots of great stories. First up on the menu, why is Mexico's president so hostile to solar investment? Considering Mexico is one of the best potential locations for solar generation. It's interesting, the Mexican president's stance on this. So Stu will dive into what that means for both Mexico and for us and the world abroad. Next up, we have U.S. power grid facing elevated risk of shortages this summer amid green push. This is via a watchdog, aka the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, which is a nonprofit that regularly monitors the grid and makes public recommendations. They're saying watch out. So Stu will dive into how hot it's going to get this summer. Next up, renewable advocacy groups ask Congress for transmission permitting reforms. This is something where us and the renewable groups, I think, are aligned. I saw this story drop, and I was like, I think for once they've got Stu on this one, because he'll dive into the details here. But considering that these renewable groups are pushing now Congress to do some sort of permitting reform, it's something we can get on board with. Next up, this new Middle East pipeline could be a game changer. There's a 2,000 kilometer pipeline that's being considered via Oman and UAE through the Arabian Sea and on way to India. That could be an extremely vital pipeline to divert stuff away from Europe. So Stu will dive into what that all means for the geopolitical economy. He'll kick it over to me. We'll cover actually a good day in oil prices. We're currently trading at or closed yesterday at 73.90 as we record this, about 6:15 here on the 23rd. Prices really being buoyed by a pretty large EIA crude oil draw of about 6 to 7 million barrels. Not much on the news front. We'll let you get out of here on a short day. Before I kick it back to Stu to start the show, again, all of the stories you are about to hear are courtesy the world's greatest website, www.energynewsbeat.com. Stu does a great job of curating that website to make sure it's up to date with all of your relevant energy and oil and gas news. Hit the description below. You can see the links and timestamps to all the different articles. Our team does a great job of curating that. Dashboard.energynewsbeat.com, the best place for all your data and energy news combo. Get it while you still can. It's definitely going behind a paywall, much like Nat Gas Intel is cutting you down to one article a day. We're cutting your access to dashboard.energynewsbeat.com very quickly. So get it while you still can. Questions at energynewsbeat.com. I'm out of breath though, Stu. Where do you want to begin?
Hey, I'm going to the next show here. The next one is why Mexico's president is so hostile to solar energy investment. Well, it's kind of like when you get hit by a mule, you kind of don't walk around that mule anymore. And I think there's some interesting things in here. You just said it in the intro, Michael. Mexico is one of the best potential locations for solar energy generation in the world. Has great sun, great beaches, on paper at least. Over the last decade, Mexico has successfully attracted billions of dollars in new investment in solar energy, but it has stalled during the president of Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. I even said a name almost right. Let's come in here. Mexico has stopped issuing permits and canceled auctions for solar projects, effectively cutting off the flow of private investor money. Let me tell you about how much. In 2017, Mexico received a whopping 35% of all renewable energy investment in Latin America. Today, they're only getting 7%. Mexico is going in the opposite. This is a quote from Rivera Rivota. Mexico is going in the opposite direction that the world is going in. This is a missed opportunity. Mexico has absolutely outstanding wind and solar resources. This is bringing up some really big points. Not the whole world is going to solar and wind anymore. So,
And what's interesting is, of all places, you would think Mexico, given its size, given its ability to actually get solar and transmit it, it seems to be easier to do that in Mexico than it would be in Alaska in the wintertime.
right.
Weather seems to be fairly good. Again, they mentioned the minimal season variability. The fact that they're not in on it says something.
It all comes down to the market, Michael. The solar cannot, by the time you try to add it to the grid, it just makes it too expensive. And poor old Mexico is, they've had to federalize Petrobras in order to, get them back into they got to make money.
Yeah. So the problem is Mexico is a really high cost of production. What they do a really good job of is hedging. They have been one of the world's most successful and well-renowned hedging programs that brings in a significant amount of government revenue. Now, the problem is their actual, it's Pemex, not Petrobras.
Oh,
that's
Petrobras, that's Brazil. My bad. Thank you.
Pemex, notoriously terrible operator. I mean, I'll just go out and say it. I'm sorry. I mean, they're not that great.
No más trabajo in la.
Well, it's a high cost operation, and I haven't heard of I necessarily haven't heard of the someone correct me if I'm wrong though, but I don't think they're drilling whoppers of wells over there in Mexico. I don't even know if they're drilling in Mexico, to be honest with you.
I'm not sure. I'm going to call them up right now. Let me get a hold of Jefe and Wapo and
give him a call. All right, what's next? Let's move on to the grid.
Let's go to the grid, dude. This is part of it. U.S. power grid facing elevated risk of shortages this summer amid green energy push. The U.S. power grid Michael, when I was growing up, I don't remember having this many power problems. We had power problems because a tornado came whizzing through. But right now, the U.S. grid is facing an elevated risk of shortages in the coming summer months amid a nationwide push to replace fossil fuel generation with green alternatives, according to the top national grid watchdog, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. Okay. The elevated risk profiles are substantial from new loads coming in. And part of it is when you tie in a wind farm, it takes years to get that thing tied in. When you do get it tied in, all of a sudden it has not communicated with the other parts of the grid. This thing is now coming online, and all of a sudden it's like balancing authorities just want to go shoot themselves in the head, actually.
Well, I think they point out a couple different things. They point out that 9 regional grids, all of which include New England, every state west of Ohio, and Ontario, Canada, are facing elevated power outage risk during this upcoming 2023 summer. This analysis specifically warned that much of that risk is driven by greater reliance on renewable energy sources, which are more dependent on favorable weather. And the key is when you have hotter days, you tend to have less wind. So they specifically point out that key states like Texas, the Southwest Power Pool, that includes Kansas and Oklahoma, and some additional 12 states between New Mexico and Iowa, could not have enough dispatchable generation from how much they've retired, considering the lower levels of wind that they're predicting. So, I should probably buy a generator, is what it sounds like. This is telling me I need to buy a generator.
Yes. And if you don't have a generator, you at least always need to have a go bag in case of a tornado. You got to be ready to go anyway for that. So electricity in America, this is a quote from Daniel Turner. Electricity in America is becoming increasingly intermittent, and it's because we're transitioning rapidly towards unreliable and untested wind and solar. Daniel Turner, founder and executive director of Power of the Future, told Fox News Digital in an interview last week.
Yeah,
Oops.
Again, we talk about dispatchable power. That's the problem with renewables. It's not dispatchable, and if you look at the article, you will notice the smokestack that is the plume of exhaust coming out of Mitchell Power Station, which is a coal-fired plant up there in Pennsylvania. I'm not saying we need to bring coal plants online, but at least give me some natural gas.
I'm all for retiring all the coal plants we can. Let's do it orderly. Let's do it in this, just like we talked about yesterday on TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, retiring a coal plant, and they're trying to put in the natural gas plant. Hey, that makes solid good sense.
It's ironic. It's shockingly common sense coming out of what seems to be a regulatory body. What do we got next here? Speaking of regulatory bodies, what's next?
Whoa, regulatory bodies, man. Renewable advocacy group asked Congress for transmission permitting reforms. Here's what the problem is, Michael. All of a sudden, you and I, we've done the help on the regulatory issues for oil and gas. Oil and gas guys are used to it. The other guys, the wind and solar, are just getting hammered with these new regulations. Hammered. Research shows that we will need to double the pace of historical transmission deployment in order to maximize the carbon emission reduction benefits of this historic legislation. The groups explain in the letter, these reforms are essential to realization of the 21st century transmission grid in America that needs to bolster economic competitiveness. Guess what? It can't happen. The amount of money needed in order to update the grid to use renewables is about 3 times the amount that the Porculus bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go halfway between you and this article and say,
okay,
I'm with them that we need to do permitting reform.
Absolutely,
and that's their core. That is really the. I mean,
that
it's
nuclear reactors take
agree.
20 years.
These groups, I mean, I'll give you an idea. Like these groups are the American Council of Renewable Energy, and the Solar Energy Industries Association. So where they're, much like the American Petroleum Institute, it's kind of obvious where their allegiances lie. So not that I want to agree with ACOR by any stretch of the imagination, but in this case, they're realizing what we've all learned in the oil and gas business. Man, regulation sucks. We've sort of in our business thrown our hands up and just gone along with it. They're hoping to get new grid updates to come in. I'm halfway with you. We do need the grid updates. Now, do we need the grid updates specifically so that we can roll out more solar? Not necessarily, in my opinion. We can quabble over what the new sources that are getting plugged into the grid, but I'm going to say I'm with them. We do need to spend we need to spend money on fixing the grid. So
I agree.
Whatever that looks like, if that means I have to show up to a dinner and sit next to somebody at the Solar Energy Industries Association, I mean, sweet, like we'll have a great dinner.
Oh, I think it'd be fantastic. But here's the thing. Regulatory processes are due to the Department of Energy. And guess what's going on? It's the legislation through regulations, and they're pumping their thing on it. But when they're pumping their views and opinions using regulatory processes, they get greedy, and they even try to over-regulate their wind and solar buddies. It's just people don't know how to do energy at the Department of Energy.
Yeah, well, it's that's sad. The people of the Department of Energy don't know how to do energy. That is sad. All right, let's move on.
Let's go to the next one. Yeah, it's kind of like the nuclear guy, the head of the nuclear waste, went shopping in airport terminals all the time. Okay, let's go to the next story here. This new Middle East pipeline could be a game changer. Boy, the title of this is really understating the dynamics of this new pipeline. The new pipeline will run along 2,000 kilometer corridor via Oman and UAE that you'd already said. This pipeline sub-project of the main Middle East to India pipeline is re-energizing plans of the Iran-Oman gas and LNG project. This is stinking huge. Listen to these numbers. The EU imported an average of over 13.4 billion cubic feet BCF per day in gas by pipeline from Russia, or around 49 trillion cubic feet for the year. So where that comes into play is this pipeline will do more than that. The new gas pipelines being planned will run along 2.9 trillion cubic feet of gas reserves, pumping into that for continued gas supplies from LNG. Unbelievable amounts of gas going through this pipeline. Politically, that is nuts.
Well, because it's the first time all of these different governments have really worked in unison to get something put together.
Right.
It takes all of this gas out of the EU, pumps it down to India, who, is basically saying, yes, thank you very much. We will take your cheap gas all day, every day.
Yes. And by the way, for the environment, the more we can get India on natural gas and LNG, the better for the planet and the people of India. I think it's phenomenally way cool.
Yeah, and I'm excited in 30 years to have some random guy on Substack break the news that this pipeline was bombed. So we will
okay. We won't have to worry about that. Anyway, yeah, because I think I may found out who's gonna do it. Do you remember the Oklahoma City bombing?
Yeah, I was not alive for that. What year was that?
80 something, 89 something.
It was fortunately in early 90s, baby.
It was 5,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate.
Ooh.
A freight train with a 30-ton shipment of ammonium nitrate disappeared from a rail car on its way to California. And so they said, oh, oops, we don't know where 30 tons when 5,000 pounds took one building down. That would happen yesterday.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's lovely, Stu. Thanks for that one as we move into oil prices. Thank goodness oil was up about 2 percentage points today after hearing about ammonia nitrate going missing. Time stands here about 6:30 here on the 23rd. Oil currently trading about 73.82, really off the back of what was a huge API projected draw of 6.7 million barrels. That dropped here at about 2:30 today. As you listen to this on Wednesday, you will know at around 10:30 Central Time what actually happens with the EIA crude oil, 9:30 Central Time, 10:30 Eastern, on what happens with crude oil inventory reserve. That's going to definitely help buoy prices. It was only a $1.6 million draw or million barrel draw from the SPR. So a lot of that is commercial. I thought this was fairly interesting, Stu. The Saudi Arabian energy minister came out today, and it was quoted as saying he was talking to short sellers. He would say those betting that prices will fall will be, quote, ouching. And he told them to watch out. These comments come amid OPEC Plus exploring cuts at their June 4th meeting.
Wow.
there's a lot of talks going around, obviously, about the debt ceiling, what's going to happen, no signs of progress. Again, we have that $31.4 trillion borrowing limit. No one really knows what's going to happen if we do end up defaulting. Actually, I mean, it's happened a couple times, and I think the scenarios are a lot scarier than what might actually happen. But in terms of just global financial stability, we obviously need to make sure that we keep that. So it'll be interesting, and we will be watching that. I think everyone's just sort of eyeing in on that OPEC decision, and then obviously what Jerome Powell does next. Fairly quiet. We had the on the oil and gas news front. I know we had Chevron picking off PDC yesterday. So I think we're going to continue to see some of those small time M&A deals. I do think there was something larger brewing out there. Chevron, Exxon, Shell, Conoco, they're not just going to be they've got huge amounts of cash right now. They got to do something with it. The question is, what do they do? Especially if PDC is willing to sell out for an all stock deal. I mean, it'd be interesting what you might be able to get for a larger company. Can you do a little half stock, half cash? Who knows? It'd be interesting to see what some of these maybe larger independents would think about doing. Outside of 30 tons of ammonia nitrate going missing, Stu, what else should we be scared about?
The
I don't know if
politicians. Yeah, the politicians.
Okay. Well, that luckily we already knew that. So if you didn't know that, newsflash: politicians don't have your best interests at heart. Sorry.
Oops.
All right, guys. Well, we'll let you get out of here. Again, email us questions@energynewsbeat.com. We appreciate all of the feedback. For Stuart Turley, I'm Michael Tanner. We'll see you tomorrow, folks.